What are rental prices doing in the UK for the rest of 2023? Hey, it's Chris here from Property Abundance, and in this video we're going to unpack this issue and look at the things that are influencing the rental market right now in the UK. Now, for those of you who are regular followers of the channel, you might recognize slightly different background here today. I am out in Slovakia right now visiting my wife's family, so I'm out in a little hot desking area that I found in her town. So bear with me with the change of background. Hopefully you like the brown, but maybe not to everyone's taste. So let's have a look at this issue. What are rental prices doing and why? So firstly, let's have a look at what are they doing. Well, look, it depends who you ask, is the honest answer at the moment. The ONS, the Office for National Statistics, has put rental price growth at 5.3% over the last 12 months from July of last year to July of this year. But then Zoopla have come in and said, well, actually, we think it's 10.5%. So pretty big difference. It's kind of double, in fact, from 5.3% to 10.5%, Zoopla saying until the year ending September 2023. One thing they do both agree on is that rent prices are going up and only continuing to do so. Why? Well, it's driven by low supply in the market, less people providing rental properties, and coupled with high demand for rental properties. Now let's have a look at why those two things exist, okay? Because basic economics, if you've got low supply, if you've got high demand, that only does one thing to pricing, and that is to push it upwards. So why have we got low supply in the UK property industry right now for rental properties? Well, it's kind of something of the government's own doing, because this is very much driven by tax change, by regulation, by new laws coming in. So let's unpack these one at a time. So the first thing that came in about 3 years ago from the time I'm recording this now, maybe 4 years ago, was something called Section 24 tax changes. Now that meant that people who are on a higher income, so taxed at the higher income rate, can no longer deduct the costs of their finance before calculating their taxable profit. So that means if you're making £1,000 of rental income, let's say you've got a £500 mortgage and you pay £100 to an estate agency to manage that property for you, and maybe another 50 to 100 quid a month on maintenance, right? So on paper, you're making something like £300 to £400 profit a month. But in reality, you're taxed on a much higher chunk of that because you can't deduct the £500 that you're paying for your mortgage before calculating your taxable profit. So you are quite literally being taxed on money you have not earned. Don't look for the logic. This is HMRC we're talking about. If they want to tax you, they're going to tax you. It doesn't need to be logical. But that's the reality of it. So with people being taxed on money they're not earning, all of a sudden buy-to-let as an investment strategy, old school buy-to-let, just didn't really make sense. Now look, there are ways around this, and we cover ways around it and how you can use more creative property strategies on other videos. So if you haven't checked those out, go and check them out. But while you're there, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel if you find this kind of content updating you on the property industry in the UK and the strategies and techniques that are working right now in the UK property industry that I use within my own 7-figure property business, TradeStays. So we've got Section 24. We've also got stamp duty. Okay, so there's an additional extra 3% added to stamp duty for each different bracket. Okay, so as stamp duty goes, you have different brackets, and if it's under a certain amount, you don't pay any, but now you do. If it's between this and this, you pay 3%, but now it's 6%. If it's between this and this, you pay 6%, but now it's 9%. So stamp duty costs for purchasing properties for investment, they've kind of had a negative impact. Okay, because why would you want to pay all this extra tax only to then be taxed even more on your rental income? Now, on top of that, you've got the legislative side of things. So there's a few different pieces of legislation that come in that are just making landlords' lives that follow the traditional buy-to-let route more and more tricky. So the most recent one and the most topical one is called the Rent Reform Bill, which has, in essence, removed the landlord's right to evict somebody from their property. Okay, it's taken away the Section 21 eviction route, which is called the not at fault eviction. So if they haven't broken the terms of the contract, you can no longer evict your tenants under using that clause, or you can't when the bill fully comes in. It's not actually in at the point of recording this, but that's the intention, is that landlords will no longer be able to just evict their tenants for any reason, which again, to me is crazy. Like, to not have control of something that you've worked hard to earn money for, that you own, and not have the right to do what you want with it, that's mental. But that's the government for you, okay? That's, maybe you have a different view on that, but that's my view. On top of this, there's additional licensing going on. So more and more so, local governments are bringing in what's called selective licensing. Okay, now Birmingham is a good example of this. They've just done this, one of the areas that I invest in heavily. And this basically means that if you're going to buy a property and become a landlord in Birmingham, it's effectively a landlord license. Okay, for every property you own, that property has to have a license. Now, why would they do this? Again, depends who you ask. You know, it's on the one hand, it's to raise rental standards. It's to make sure that people are meeting minimum criteria for housing, which is fair. You know, if someone's going to pay rent to live in a place, that has to meet a certain standard. That's fair. That makes sense. The more cynical amongst us might say, well, look, this is a cash grab. This is a way to be able to implement another tax on landlords. You know, landlords are a bit of an easy target because not always the most popular people in society as a whole. So an easy person to be able to do a tax grab from. So again, it depends who you ask. And there are obviously two sides to every coin. So that all these different things, the tax changes on rental income, the tax changes on purchasing property, the legislative requirements and raising the standards time and time again, with the intention of pushing out bad landlords, but in the bycatch you push out a lot of good landlords as well. And the additional licensing, which adds costs and bureaucratic burden to the whole process of renting properties. It makes buy-to-let investing, the old school buy-to-let, much less attractive as an investment strategy. Now, again, look, there are ways you can do this that get around a lot of these issues. There are ways you can do this that still create a very profitable business. So I encourage you to go and check my channel here. If you haven't already checked some of the other videos, go and check out some of the other videos where you can see different application strategies, different ways of structuring your business that can still work. But the old school buy-to-let landlords, which forms up the bulk of the buy-to-let market, have been bludgeoned by the government over the last 2 terms. And this has resulted in a lower supply. So it is a catastrophe of their own making. You know, they see landlords as a soft target, they see them as an easy target, and by harming landlords, you harm renters. That is a fact. Costs have to be passed on, or they don't supply the property, in which case that hurts renters too, because then they have nowhere to live, and it increases their cost as well. So a bit of a catastrophe of their own making here. So that's the low supply side. Let's talk about the high demand side. Why is there such high demand for rental properties right now? Well, it comes down to prices. Okay, it comes down to affordability. There is a metric which is always one worth watching, called the average earnings to average house price ratio. Now, we are currently at an average earnings to average house price ratio of 8.3 times. This is higher than it has ever been since the end of the 1800s. So houses are more unaffordable now than they have ever been, apart from if we go back all the way to the 1800s, the end of the 1800s, which is like mental. For a long time, they sat around the 4 times average annual salary. And, you know, people, the baby boomers amongst us will be talking about, yeah, well, look, back in my day, I could buy a house for 4 times the salary. Now it's double that. So young people are struggling to afford to buy houses, get a foot on the ladder. That's just a fact. It is more unaffordable. Now, couple that, the fact that house prices are already way up here compared to average salaries, but couple that with the fact that right now we have a period of very high inflation. Yes, it's coming down, but actually true inflation is still on the rise. So it depends whether you listen to the media or look at true CPIs. But with high inflation, that means that even though people are earning more and salaries are on the up, it gives them less of their salary at the end of each month to be able to save, to be able to fund house prices. So there's less people saving more money, and therefore less ability to build up a deposit to be able to buy a house. So what is the alternative? Well, the alternative, if you're not buying, is renting. So immediately you've got all these people that maybe want to buy a house that can't buy a house right now because they can't, this inflation is preventing them from saving a deposit. Now, this gets compounded even further because the government, to try and tackle the inflation issue, obviously raised interest rates. And the Bank of England, sorry, I shouldn't blame the government, it's the Bank of England, has raised interest rates for the last 14 consecutive months. In fact, this month is the first time in the last 14 months that interest rates have not been raised. They've been held at 5.25% base rate. Now, again, what does this impact have? Well, obviously this makes borrowing money a lot more expensive. So not only do people now have the difficulty of saving up the deposit because of the high inflation, but the response to that, raising interest rates, has made borrowing the money more unaffordable as well. So now people can't save up the deposit and they can't afford to pay the mortgage even if they do get the mortgage. Now, additionally to that, with interest rates consistently going up, banks have also raised the barrier or raised the criteria for people to actually get lending in the first place. So they've introduced more stress testing. Now, for example, I think it's Barclays brought in a stress test of 6.5% and 125% of purchase price interest costs in rent. Let me explain that. That means that if, let's say, you want to firstly borrow a mortgage, well, they're going to check that you can afford that mortgage if the rates go up even higher. So they're going to stress test you to 6.5%. And then on top of that, they're going to apply this 125% multiple, meaning that if you get a rental income for buy-to-let rentals, if you get a rental income of £1,000, you need to be able to afford, if your mortgage interest is £1,000, you need to be able to generate a rental income of at least £1,250. But on top of the 6.5% stress test. So it's double stress tested. Now that obviously hits buy-to-let investors, but that stress test on the percentage, the affordability on a higher percentage, also hits first-time buyers, home buyers, people buying for themselves to live in. So there's multiple reasons here that's kind of driving and fueling this house price growth. 10.5% of Zupa have said, 5.5% of the ONS have said, this is rapid growth. Now that has several knock-on consequences to the housing market, to the rental market, to the rent-to-rent market, to the serviced accommodation market, to the HMO market. In times like this when demand is high and prices are high, HMOs thrive. Okay, we have no empty rooms in any of our HMOs because people are looking for ways to save money. Okay, people are looking for a way to be able to reduce their monthly costs. And HMO rooms, being the cheapest form of accommodation, is a really, really great way to do that. So if you want to learn a bit more about HMOs, for example, go and check the video that we have on our channel here. Or alternatively, maybe you've already got HMOs and actually you'd like to learn how you can leverage some of these facts to start to build and grow your property business more yourself. So either way, check out the link description down below where I've included a link where you can get a free, completely complimentary, no pressure, nothing to no hard sell on it or anything like that, but a free one-to-one consultation with one of my team. Okay, now on that call, we will get to grips with where you are right now, what your goals are, what you're looking to achieve, and what resources you have to do so, and we'll give you your clarity on what your next step should be. So don't be a victim for the market. Don't let these market pressures just suddenly have an impact on you. Understand this stuff, understand where the opportunities are, and make sure that you're on the right side of the equation. Because with every market, with every up and down, there are winners and losers. And the people who are on the winning side are the ones who are informed and know what's going on and know how to take the next step. Make sure you're on that side of the equation. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.